Being a pianist that makes videos on YouTube means that I attract a very specific type of audience, and oftentimes that includes a lot of talented pianists, and that is never more evident than when I react to my subscribers playing. So today we have the 4th installment of reacting to my subscribers piano playing, so let's get into it. So first up we have Austin. Austin has been playing for 3 years now and never had a lesson. He studied theory and learning to play by ear on YouTube, and lately he's really got into jazz music. Nice, so it's really well played, and I like the fact that he put it into kind of different sections where it had different feelings to it. So he had a section that was higher up and a section that was kind of low down. The chords for this are G minor, E flat major, and D major. I also like the fact that he threw in a slightly jazzy kind of solo section. Because this song is in G minor, the scale that I would use to start learning how to solo over this is the G minor blues scale, which is G, B flat, C, D flat, D, and F. That scale will work over all of these chords. And there's 2 things I would say about adding kind of jazz solos into songs. The first one is try and be sparing with it. It's very tempting to go as fast as possible and start adding a load of notes in, but sometimes it can sound more impressive if an audience know that you have all the skills and yet you're choosing not to use them. And then that way there's kind of room to grow and then really expand it. The other thing I would say about jazz solos is when you find a pattern when you're improvising that you like a lot, repeat it a lot because it buys you time to think. As with most elements in music, it's kind of about building up a catalogue of patterns that you have, and with jazz improvisation, that is kind of more evident than anywhere else. The other thing I would say is because these chords are G minor, E flat major, and then D major, if you play a G minor chord, that's the notes G, B flat, and D. If you play an E flat major chord, that's the notes E flat, G, and B flat, which shares 2 of the same notes, which is G and B flat. If you keep the D from the G minor chord, when you play the E flat chord, you get an E flat major 7, which is kind of a jazzier chord. So if you add the 7th to the D chord as well, which gives you a C on top, D, F sharp, A, and C, you get kind of an extra flavour to the chord sequence. Rather than... Although the one thing that I don't think should be sacrificed, unless you are like gliding up the keys, is the timing. This particular song is quite rhythmic. So if you want to retain some of that rhythmic idea, then you want to make sure that you stay in time all the time. And I know that's difficult to do when you're trying to think of what to play next. So the way to practice that is to play something really basic in the left hand, but try and keep the rhythm. And that'll happen by giving your left hand a bit more focus than your right hand. When you're doing solos and making up chords and playing melodies in the right hand, it can be quite hard to leave a bit of focus left for your left hand to stay in time. And then when it feels really comfortable in time, then you can start adding more complicated things on top. But it's very cool, and I can tell Austin has gone down that theory rabbit hole with all the scales and chords that he's using. Okay, next up we have Chris. Chris plays the piano as a hobby and started about 30 years ago, although he took some time off and started again during the time period which shall not be named. Wow, very nice. A mixture of Ode to Joy and Canon, Beethoven and Pachelbel in one sitting. It's super interesting because some of these melody notes from Ode to Joy make Pachelbel's Canon's chords more interesting. So here you've got a D major chord going to an A major chord, which isn't unusual. Those chords fit, and it feels like that melody could have those chords underneath it anyway. But then when you get this B minor chord, because the melody is an A, you get like a B minor 7 chord, which makes it sound a little bit more modern than either of those pieces are. Also, it's really fascinating that he moved his hand over to play the melody an octave higher as well. In the second half of this chord sequence, which is G, D, G, and then A, the chords don't fit too well because at the end you've got an E in the melody with a G chord underneath it. And then it finishes on a D with an A chord underneath it, which doesn't massively make a lot of sense. But then you use like a moving chord line to change the chords more frequently so that it fits. It was really nice. If Chris hasn't already, he should definitely notate it and sell the sheet music and do a longer version of it, because it's a really nice idea, and I can imagine that a lot of students who are learning these types of pieces and want to perform like an exhibition piece, a piece that kind of plays with audience expectation, then this is a great piece to do that. You could even start by playing Canon first and then Ode to Joy and then combining them together. Okay, next up we have Phoenix. Felix has been playing for 4 years and is playing the waltz in A minor. Very nicely done and very good. It's very hard to get a clear distinction between the right hand melody and the left hand chords, and he's done a really good job with that. A lot of people will play this and play this left hand really loud, and it kind of drowns out the melody. So a couple of things that might help. Firstly, try and add the pedaling for this first note of each bar going to the chord. The reason for that is because your hand can't actually physically reach from the bass note to the chord, and they're all technically part of the same chord. You want to try and make it sound like it's joined up, and you can do that using the pedal. Also, because it's a waltz, you want a really strong first beat and then a weak second and third beat, so you're kind of getting an cha, cha kind of sound. Adding the pedal on the first beat will definitely help that, but also you can just lean on that first beat a little bit. I would also say try and follow the contour of the melody. So if the melody is going up in pitch, try and push that melody just slightly with the dynamics so it feels like it's got a more natural up and down with wherever the melody's going. You can also practice this really slowly, really focusing on how you're pressing the keys down and making it sound really overly musical. That way, when you speed it up and play it at a more natural pace, all of those elements will be there automatically. It also seems like Phoenix has a really dominant first, second, and third finger in that right hand, because those are the fingers that he's opting for most of the time. In this piece, it happens to be slightly first, second, and third finger dominant. But I would definitely throw in some exercises into the practice for that fourth and fifth finger. It's sounding really good, though. It's really not an easy piece to play and make sound really musical. Okay, next up we have Yoel. Yoel is 14 and has been playing for 4 years. He plays mostly classical, but does dabble in other genres as well, and likes Anna Menz's arrangements. And this is him playing a piece that I have reacted to before, which is Unravel from Tokyo Ghoul. Very well played, and for 14 years old, very talented. Although I'm not a massive fan of the word talented because it kind of disregards hard work. But he's very good. He played the opening of this piece super musically, and he added a lot of extra time in there, which I liked. And there's also a lot of difficult stuff in that opening that he played really well. I suppose the hardest thing to master out of this opening part is this bit. The one thing I would say about that is it's all in the wrists, so it's really worth over-exaggerating it and playing it slightly slower just to practice it. Because as it gets faster, it's easy for your wrists to lock up, and you don't want that to happen. So the more you can practice it in really, really loose, then hopefully that'll stick when you start speeding it up. And it's also really tempting to rush to the next bit and cut that short. So the way I would suggest practicing that is by doing this part really slowly, and then playing the first note that you're going to play at the top there. Because as soon as you've got to that high section, then it's easy to carry on. It's just getting from here to there as loose as possible. The other thing I would say is just be careful that you catch the pedal when you're playing the low notes, jumping up to high chords, because you don't want there to be a kind of a gap between the two where you've let go of the pedal too soon. The other thing I would say about the pedal is if you play low notes and then you've got these arpeggios, which happens a lot in this piece, what I would try and do is try and make the melody as legato as possible and as connected as possible by just using your fingers. That way, if you need to kind of half release the pedal to make these notes clearer, then you can, and you kind of want these notes to sound, because although they do fill out the texture, they also sound very impressive, and that's kind of what sells this piece of music. Super nicely done though. That is really not an easy piece, and to be able to play something that difficult at 14, it is a testament to the hard work you've put into learning it and learning the piano. Next up we have Gabriel Riley, I'm not sure. But they've been playing for 1 year, and they've played pieces like Moonlight Sonata for release, and some more difficult pieces like the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata, and some are by Vivaldi. And they decided to try a custom version of La Campanella. Very cool. I assume this is your custom version of La Campanella. And honestly, this is exactly what I love about music, is someone taking a piece of music and just messing around on the piano with it. That is exactly what music is about. I have absolutely no doubt that Riley is going to become very, very good with using his ears. And people often wonder how people get very good at playing by ear and things, and this is exactly it. Just taking an idea from a piece of music and playing around with it and seeing what sounds you like. And it's also how you get very good at arranging and writing music. Just having a complete lack of fear when it comes to just taking a piece of music and doing what you want with it. So please keep finding those sounds and messing around with pieces. The one thing I would say is when you're using the black notes, try and stick to using all of your fingers. Try and get used to working out which fingers will mean that you don't have to do anything awkward on the piano. For example, you could play the E flat with a finger 2 in the left hand, and then the B with a thumb, which gives you enough fingers to play the rest of the melody. And you only have to work that out once to be able to do that every time. That way you're able to do what you want on the piano, but you're also working on your kind of natural ability to use good technique at the same time. But you're doing a great job, and it would be even better if you can learn your melodies from the sheet music, because then you're practicing reading the music, finding sounds that you like, using good technique. It's all good stuff. Next up, we have Zan. And Zan has been playing for about 5 years, but 2 years seriously. He has ambitions of playing Godowski's Passacaglia or Alkan's Piano Concerto. And in his videos playing Un Sospiro by Liszt, which happens to be one of my favourite pieces. And he's also started practicing Chopin's first ballade. Once again, very impressive. This is really not an easy piece. It sounds almost like it should be easy because it's got a really clear melody, and as an audience member, you're just hearing kind of like flowing chords and a melody. But to play this, it's really difficult. And the reason for that is because you've got some melody notes that are played in the right hand and some melody notes that are played in the left hand. And that has got to sound like one united thing while you're playing these flourishing chords underneath across both hands as well. And it can be really hard to be accurate and play spread chords and then quickly jump to whichever note you need in the melody. And that is even more the case when you've got to play the melody in octaves, where you're having to jump between the hands and jump octaves in the left hand and get back very quickly. So what I would say is don't be hard on yourself for accuracy, because this is a very difficult piece to be accurate. And there's a couple of ways you can combat that actually might help the piece in the long term anyway, and that is to push and pull the time a little bit more. When you're playing these flourishing chords, that does two things. One, it sounds really musical and you're kind of ebbing and flowing, but at the same time, you're kind of buying yourself just a little bit of time to get to those notes and be a little bit more conscious and accurate with them. I played this piece myself for one of my recitals at music college. It was either third or fourth year, I can't quite remember. But I remember throughout the time that I was practicing and learning this piece that accuracy was one of my biggest issues as well. And to practice the accuracy on those crossovers, it really does just need flexing, slowing down, and then practicing in really small sections. So you're almost training the distance between the lowest note and the melody note into your subconscious. The other thing I would say is to try and practice really quiet dynamics with these arpeggios on their own. Because unlike Unravel from Tokyo Ghoul, where you want your arpeggios to stick out in the left hand, in this case, you do want it to sound like it's kind of bubbling under the surface, and it all just sounds like a landscape, like a wash of watercolour underneath that melody. It is such a great piece. Now, definitely recommend going and listen to it if you've never heard it before. Okay, next up we have Matheus, who has been playing for 1.5 years and has learnt through YouTube videos and mainly memorizing pieces. And so he's trying to work on his reading music but finds it very difficult. Yeah, so I would say, although you mentioned in your message that you didn't practice with a metronome and that you found timing very difficult, I would say your timing is actually not that bad. If you do want to practice timing, especially with a piece like this that requires a little bit more flexibility than a metronome might give you, then what I would suggest doing is practicing small sections of the music, so maybe a bar or 2 bars at a time, but count out loud, because it's more important that you know where the notes fit in terms of beats of the bar, because then you are in complete control over what speed you're playing the notes, rather than just trying to get to them as soon as you can. But generally speaking, Matheus plays it very well. I think the benefit for a piece like this for reading the sheet music is that you can really focus on the small details. So for example, you can take a bar and you can work on the dynamics, you can work on the phrasing, because you know that it's kind of categorized on the page for you. Whereas when you work it out from a YouTube video or by playing by ear or something like that, you can't really focus in on the detail and practicing specific techniques within that piece of music because you don't know where the dynamics change, for example, or where staccato notes are. So I would definitely recommend reading the sheet music for it. I would also, for a piece like this, really practice arpeggios. So this particular piece is based around 2 chords, or the main theme is anyway. And those are A minor and then E major. So you get A minor, and then E major, and then A minor again. And if you want to make sure that your left hand can more easily stay in time, then one good way of doing that is by practicing A minor and E major arpeggios. And you can practice arpeggios and scales and things really musically, and it'll kind of train in your fingers' ability to stay in control. As ever, this has been another video full of great players. If you want to send me your playing, then you are welcome to do that with the link in the description. And if you want to see me react to more of my subscribers playing, then head on through and I will see you there.